Just keep looking. I'd like to call the Linn-Mar School Board meeting to order at 5 o'clock in the boardroom. Will you please determine a quorum?
Buckles.
Here.
Eisenberg.
Here.
Lawson.
Here.
Maury.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Walt.
Here.
And Weaver.
Here.
Quorum is present at 5 o'clock.
Move
Move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Believe we have one audience communication today.
Yep, we have one from Becky Garms, and it reads, Dear Linn-Mar School Board members and Superintendent Biscard, I have 2 children enrolled as virtual students through Linn-Mar this year. We made the decision to do virtual school because we had the ability to have a parent home to help with their education, and we wanted to make classrooms smaller and safer for staff and students that were in person. We trusted that Linn-Mar would provide an equitable education and offer the same excellence in education that Linn-Mar prides itself on. Unfortunately, this has not been our experience. Our boys both have teachers who are beyond our expectations. They have really embraced their roles and have gone the extra mile for their students. However, virtual students really only get half of a teacher, as our virtual teachers are expected to have 2 classrooms, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. They have been asked to do the impossible. In 2.5 hours a day, Monday through Thursday with shorter days on Friday, they are to give students all of the full group and small group instruction in reading and math, with science and social studies only if they're able to include it without taking away from reading and math. While the virtual teachers have done their absolute best to include science and social studies into their short days, what the virtual students are receiving is not at all comparable to what our in-person students are receiving. We waited months for our first grader to receive a science kit. It consisted of 2 plastic cups, a string, a tongue depressor, and 2 rubber bands. My 4th grader has not received any materials, though they have been doing some science work in class. The essentials courses have been treated as anything but essential for virtual students. The instruction is never by the same teacher and varies in quality. Our virtual kids have essentially had a different substitute teacher the entire year for art and music. No one is able to comment on my boys' progress in these subjects as they don't have a dedicated teacher. Their PE lessons are in written form, emailed to the students weekly. While I work to make sure that our boys do their art and music work each week, there is no one at the school district who is investing consistently in our virtual students' education in art and music. Art and music have gone from being their favorite classes to being an unwanted chore every week. I began voicing my concerns about these issues already at the beginning of the year. I was told that they were working on it and changes were coming, but nothing has changed. I've also been told that Linn-Mar didn't receive additional funding to hire virtual teachers. While no additional funds may have been directly earmarked for virtual instruction, our schools still receive the same amount of funding per student, whether the student is in the building or virtual. Our virtual students receive textbooks and a computer device from the district, but they have not used any art supplies, science materials, musical instruments, or even any incidental things like hand sanitizer or toilet paper. They get 1 half day of instruction from a teacher, and the rest is just videos from inconsistent instructors from the district. The last I checked, there are 537 virtual students enrolled in preschool through 4th grade. That is an entire school's worth of students who are getting half of a teacher and no recognizable teacher for art, music, and PE. We have an entire school's worth of kids who are not receiving actual guidance instruction. Our school's guidance counselor has made a lunch available for students, but the timing doesn't work for our family. Lunch with a guidance counselor is also not equitable to what our in-person students are receiving. Our virtual kids have unique needs and deserve to receive a full guidance course with a consistent instructor dedicated to virtual students. We need to have someone in the district who is investing in our students' mental and emotional health and well-being. I realize that we are flying a plane while we are building it. What our virtual teachers have been able to accomplish has been amazing. We are forever grateful for them and their dedication to their craft. However, I feel like we are at the point where the district has given up on making any changes for the remainder of the year. The attitude seems to be, well, if you want music and art or more time with the teacher, you just need to go back to the building. My children love their virtual teachers and have been doing well academically in the virtual setting. I hate that I feel like we have to choose between letting them stay with an amazing teacher who they love and who has been a constant for them this whole year, or get a full education that is comparable to what their in-person peers are receiving. We're just over halfway through the year. It's not too late to try and give our virtual students an equitable education in all subjects to their in-person peers. There's a lot of talk amongst virtual families for their students to return in-person learning for the fourth quarter, largely because of these weaknesses in the virtual program. This will lead to a logistical nightmare for schools as they absorb students into the classrooms, making social distancing more difficult. It would possibly also include requiring some teachers to switch from virtual teaching to in-person teaching for one quarter, which is less than ideal and a logistical nightmare. Linn-Mar has a reputation for excellence in education and has rightfully earned that reputation. What we offered at the beginning of the year for virtual instruction was great, considering that we were learning as we went. But as the year has progressed, we have fallen behind. Our excellence in education is still provided to our in-person students, but our virtual students have been left behind. It's not too late to change this. Thank you for your time, Becky Garms.
Okay, thank you, JT. Go on to informational reports. Nathan, you have some things about the student assessment update.
Yeah. Well, good evening, everybody. I get to talk with you again and share some information about our winter data. And I know we're all just been excited to kind of see a snapshot of where we're at with this. So I just wanted to, and we just, as we were crafting this in our directors, teaching and learning department, we just wanted to address a couple things. And not that these are excuses by any means, but just to remember our context that we're in, because this is really quite a unique situation in education during the pandemic. So first off, you'll see that this is just a snapshot. So our winter data is typically really good for us because it provides our buildings and teachers with some actionable steps that they can do yet before the end of the year. I also want to talk a little bit just about learning loss, and that's a term that we just hear, in the news and kind of nationally. We are lucky that we still had our teachers working for the most part. I think learning loss sometimes, especially in Iowa and especially for our Linn-Mar teachers, doesn't do justice to our teachers that have really put in a lot of work, because even though we didn't have required courses last year, we still made attempts to provide instruction to kids. And so, for us, that was critical, and we wanted to continue that. The other thing with the testing is we're about, we're shorter of a window due to derecho too. So typically when we test our kids in the winter is farther along in the curriculum than we are now, just based on the delayed start with the storm. We also had limited professional development, and we knew this going in. This is not a surprise, but when we moved the days to the front, we just didn't have as much time to work with teachers and be responsive to some of that data as we could have if we would have had that regular PD. Now, there are some things we're doing. We've gotten some dates built in. Our calendar next year addresses this, so certainly this will be a point of emphasis for us moving forward. And then, of course, our just return to learn plan, which we looked at, every other week in our board meetings of just where are we at? Are we hybrid? Are we in person? And so there were some of those things that happened throughout the fall. You all know that. I just, wanted to put that in context there for the community. So let's dig into our data. But first, before I do that, I want to just talk about how we, kind of circling back to our return to learn plan, why we chose to do the things we did in terms of student learning. So if you remember, and it was last year about this time, right before spring break, is when I remember us in cabinet thinking, they're really not going to shut schools down, are they? And pretty soon, that's what, little did we know that would be for a whole 45 days of the fourth quarter. So this research comes from the state. Actually, the state didn't do the research. They compiled it for us as part of our return to learn plan. So you can see in red there at the top that we missed that quarter four, right? You would think that, well, if you just backed up or tried to squeeze in 5 quarters worth of work in 4 quarters, or just go back and cover everything that you could do and that you missed, would be a logical approach to that. Well, the state stepped in and said, you know what, we looked at some research from Hurricane Katrina in the state of Louisiana, that model doesn't necessarily work. If you continue to focus on what kids are behind in, you're going to be perpetually behind, right? So the state and our return to learn plan really adopted this approach, and you can see that on the bottom graphic where we tried to sprinkle in, and that's what we're calling it, sprinkling in standards throughout the year. We are just getting to that point, so I would assume that we would do a lot more sprinkling in the next quarter as we approach fourth quarter with those skills that were missed. Now, those can be class-wide things, and I'll talk about that at the end. Those can be just teachable moments. But if you remember in our Return to Learn plan, our directors, especially K-8, because high school is so course specific, but Carla and Erica really worked with their teachers during the spring to say what are the priority standards that were missed. So we have that in a document. If you're a fourth grade teacher in our district, you know that from the third grade teachers, that these were things that I missed with our kids that you'll have to sprinkle in throughout the year. So that bottom model, that equitable approach is really what we tried to target with our Return to Learn plan. Questions on that? Does that make sense?
The word in that orangish tab that's in the equitable approach.
Support.
Got it.
Yeah, sorry, that's kind of hard to see. And again, just support through interventions or class-wide things, reteaching, that type of thing. So let's take a look at this. This data comes then from our FAST testing scores. So this is comparing Iowa, Grant Wood, and Linn-Mar, and you can see the different colors there. Our FAST data from last school year, so it would have been last 1920 fall and then 2020 winter, to this current fall and winter. And again, we look at this K6 just to identify patterns, where are we at. So this would be the measure of reading that they use within the FAST system. And you can see there the percentage of students that were at benchmark. So that percentage means those students were meeting benchmark. Really interesting that our trend data follows really closely with the state and the AEA. But obviously we did see a drop in test scores of where kids are at. Now, again, that we've still got plenty of time to address that, and I'll talk about what that kind of looks like as far as next steps for us. But you could see there then at fall, roughly where our students were this year, and then our winter scores were at just above 71, almost 72% of our students at benchmark in grades K through 6. Now, our buildings have much more specific data than this. I know this is big picture, but within the FAST system, every teacher can see this information with their individual students. So they can see who's right now currently at benchmark, who's not, what they can work with their teams as far as what are we doing about that, visit with their teachers in the building, whether that be, second grade, we're all going to try this, or maybe we need to adjust lessons moving forward, and then obviously start sprinkling in those skills that they have missed. I didn't include it in here, but I would say that our lower scores, so first grade, which is you could probably assume because they missed the last part of kindergarten, first grade scores tend to be lower than our upper level, third, fourth, fifth grade scores. And when I show you the middle school data, it's going to be important because I think there's a real clear definition here, or a break in our data, because these kids are still learning how to read, right? Our little ones are still putting all the pieces together, learning how to make those sounds and letters, whereas our older kids have switched. Most of them are comfortable reading and proficient readers, and now they're reading to learn for their information. So that's a snapshot of where we're at with elementary. What's interesting is when you look at the middle school data. So I have two graphs here. We have 7th and 8th grade reading, and this comes from our NWEA assessment, our MAP assessment, which we do 3 times a year. So you can see the line in green then is the national cohort over 2 years, and then our scores in red is our Linn-Mar students. So, how you would track that is if they were in 7th grade in 1920, they're going to be in 8th grade at the far right of that in 2021. So there's a couple interesting things with the data. And again, I just wanted to share with you some of the observations that we see from this. But obviously you can tell there's growth. And our students in 7th and 8th grade actually performed higher than they did last year in reading, considering all of those factors. So I think there's some things we can point to with that. I think that generates some additional questions. But again, just like with FAST, those NWEA scores are student specific. So the staff at the middle school can certainly drill down right to the individual student level and see where were they last year, where are they this year, what strengths do they have in some of the standard scores that breaks out in NWEA. And I know that we still did, even though that data is not in here, we did do that 5th and 6th grade, but we didn't have comparative data because we didn't test 5th graders last year. Well, we didn't test at the end of the year. but 5th and 6th grade also have NWEA data. So hopefully moving forward, we would have collective 5-8 data for our reading.
Hey Nathan,
Yes.
how accurate is that NWEA data at the moment? You know, they didn't have scores from last year, so I know they're gonna have some norming that they're gonna have to do, and so I'm just curious, you know, how much information we can draw out of that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty accurate. I would say of our measures, it's probably the most accurate measure outside of maybe our classroom assessments, which, you know, then could vary widely from teacher to teacher, but
Have they,
With-
has NWEA communicated about, you know, the accuracy of it?
yeah,
when we're
yeah,
looking at it?
actually, I'm glad you asked that. I sat in on a webinar because NWA was new to me when I started, so anytime I've tried to learn more about that. We actually heard from a large school system in Texas that had used NWA, and the presenters from the company were talking about the correlations with how they ran statistics based on the shutdown, and that NWA is a really valid and reliable way to help determine next steps for students. Now, obviously that was presented by the company,
Yep.
but they featured the school district using this data, and it was very positive. So yes, I feel comfortable that that's very accurate data. And again, because you have a national normed test, you know, used by students all over the nation, that really helps focus in on that, you know, reliability of the measure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just think it's, you know, maybe a good thing to keep an eye on, and not just for the NWEA, but for sort of all of our testing data for this year. Not that, I mean, not that there's nothing to be drawn out of it. Of
Oh,
course,
sure.
there's a lot of information. I just think we just have to be a little bit conservative, you know, when we consider that because there wasn't testing
Yep.
for, you know,
Now,
most kids.
this is only fall and winter. So I don't know, I didn't put that on there very well. So, you know, this does not include spring. So this shows fall to fall test window, winter to winter. Now, obviously, those are different groups of students, because if they were in 7th grade last year, they're in the 8th grade this year. But we did have those measures previously, and so that does give us a pretty reliable measure to see, well, where were kids really before COVID and the shutdown, and where are they at now? And when Eric and I went through this, we were pleasantly surprised to see the growth there. I don't think we anticipated that. We kind of anticipated it to be more of a dip from what we saw at K-6.
I think that's a good point too about the data in general, because especially when we get to Iowa assessments coming forward this spring, you think back to the last 3 years of Iowa assessments, it's really changed every year, some by their decision making and some just by COVID. So going forward, it's almost gonna be a 5-year window of really hard to get any longitudinal data out of Iowa assessments.
You still didn't really have, you know, the data was sort of still settling in for the new Iowa assessment. You know what I mean? Like, we weren't really
right.
through that whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
And now we're kind of going through this, you know, next thing that's going to kind of convolute that data a little bit. I just, you know, not, again, like, I'm sure there's plenty of information, good information
Yeah.
that we can draw out of this. I just, you know, we just need to be aware.
Shannon and I talked about that too, that, you know, for Iowa assessments, it's probably going to be 4 to 5 years before we see trends with that, or
Yeah.
can determine trends because of exactly
Yes.
what you're saying. So, good. Here's math data. And again, the same thing. So you can see 7th grade in the fall of last year, then 7th grade in winter to 8th graders, then this year in the fall, and then the 8th grade winter score.
Nathan, when I look at these graphs, this one, and not the last one, but maybe the first one of elementary data,
Yep.
I wonder, no, next one, sorry, that one.
Yeah.
So I guess it's middle school data. I just wonder how you think it is that we managed to do that. I see all of these dips from everybody else, and we never dipped. You know, you see that in the elementary reading data. We did have that kind of huge
Yeah.
dip, but, you know, we're not seeing any dip. I'm kind of curious
Yeah.
what you think is at play there. I mean, which is a kudos, of
Yeah.
course,
Oh,
to
absolutely.
our teachers
Absolutely.
and our students.
That would be a great dissertation topic for somebody.
Shannon?
Because
Shannon?
you could
Solve those
really,
problems.
Yeah.
you could really dig into that. But for me, and this is just very general, my opinion is, you know, 2 things. And I'll go back to that reading to learn and learning how to read. Like, that's really hard when you're a young one. to obviously learn the process of
Right.
reading. And they missed some very specific things in learning how to read. These kids, for the most part, know how to read and can pull information from text. I also think it just shows the effort on our teachers through the shutdown to still provide as much instruction as we can, and to continue that into this year, really, with even the interrupted modes of learning that we had. Our teachers were still focused on providing good instruction for kids. So you're right, it's a lot to dig into, and it's never that you can make one determination off of the data, but it's just interesting to see that trend, because we might have, and you might have, before tonight, had thought you'd see a dip with that.
I sure did.
I think
I'll be
that-
totally upfront and honest, I sure did, and
Yeah.
that's certainly heartwarming to
So,
see
you know,
those.
the other one, and this is kind of interesting too with math. So if you look on the far left, last year, our 7th graders, which are our current 8th graders, in the fall of, well, let's just look at winter. So that would be the second one, the 2021. And then this is the same group of kids, 8th grade 2021, that have shown pretty considerable growth. And math would be one of those things that our families would sometimes think, oh, if we missed math, you know, we hear that a lot at the high school. Well, you can't, you know, what if they take some time off, or they don't take a math class this year? And so even with all of the disruptions and the way we think of math being so sequential, our kids still, you know, performed better in math. So yeah, just some really interesting observations. Now, how we use this is what I wanted to just spend some time talking with you about. So, you know, when I mentioned that about our model and I showed that graphic at the beginning, if we focused on all the unfinished stuff, we'll never move forward. And that's obviously, we don't have time for that. We can't be perpetually behind. So we're having to maximize those learning through just-in-time scaffolds, lessons that present themselves throughout the year. So here's what I anticipate that looking like, and right now we're getting into it. 4th grade, maybe 5th grade, when they start talking about fractions, they missed a chunk of that, obviously, last year. So what our teachers are going to do is go back to that document. If I'm a 4th grade teacher and I start fractions, my 4th graders aren't probably going to have the foundational knowledge they need to be successful with that. So we talked about whole class interventions. We kind of talked about taking a pause. Hey, let's go back and let's review. I have this document from your 3rd grade teacher last year. Let's review some of those key skills. Maybe take 10, 15 minutes. Maybe take a whole class period if they need to really go back and review that stuff. Those are those little, the orange support bar and the little quarter checks that pop in and out through there. We'll probably see more of them coming up 4th quarter, but that's really what we're planning to do to help continue to close that gap. We also, Gayla, am I able to see my notes on here? Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yep. So a couple other things that I just want to highlight is, yeah, that list that we created of our priority standards, we reviewed that way back at the beginning of the year. So our team is going to put that back in front of teachers so that, again, you can see, hey, remember this that we talked about in August? Here's that priority list of standards. Make sure you're reviewing that document. We talked about sprinkling standards, and that's the terminology that we used with teachers in the fall in professional learning so that they could, you know, think of that process as they go out through the year to continue to sprinkle those in. Talked about classroom interventions, the topics that were generated last year. And again, we tried to have, when you think about the 4th quarter that we missed, we tried to have teachers really be focused and prioritize that. Like, what were your most essential things? So not 45 days of lessons, but, you know, maybe 6 to 8 to 10, whatever it is, really essential standards. And those are what we generated and then shared with the other grade levels so that they could see that. Talked about purposeful reteaching. Only other thing I wanted to mention is that I believe, based on what we're seeing, this is going to be more than a one-year process. So this sprinkling will probably continue into next year. I just think we're probably naive if we think we're going to catch every kid up, because we know that kids all learn at different rates and paces. Some of them, even though we sprinkle this in, they still may not fully understand it until we get to that next year. So one of the things we've talked about as teaching and learning is, what other things do we need to provide to supports? Do we need to reprioritize standards again this spring so that teachers have that information moving forward? Now, fast, NWEA, we have all these checkpoints to continue to monitor how we're doing. And then we are excited about the Iowa assessments. Even though that's going to take time and that's logistically a lot to administer, that's really going to be our measure of did we meet the standards this year that we intended to meet. And now that we've been through the test, I think those measures are going to be a little bit more reliable as far as where we're at with that.
Hey, Nathan,
Yes.
do you have this information broken out for in-person or hybrid kids versus online? Have you looked at that data individually? And how does that, if you have, how does that compare?
I haven't. This is all together. And some of the reasons why we haven't is because we would have to do some manually pulling out of the data. So we talked about that in the beginning of the year. Do we create a standalone school for our virtual, which might have made sense for some of this data stuff. Our teachers certainly can pull their students out, but when we look at Echo Hill, we're still looking at Echo Hill virtual students and kids that are on site.
That seems like something, I guess I'm a little taken aback that you guys haven't looked at that data individually. That seems like something you would definitely want to be looking at. Is there a reason that you haven't?
Well, we haven't yet as teaching and learning to put that together, but our teachers would, because if you're teaching online, you have the same access to the data that kids would have taken. You know, if you're teaching online as a third grade teacher, you can still see where your kids are at.
Right, but don't you want to know that, and don't we want to know that?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
seems like a
Yep.
really important thing for us to be looking at.
Well, especially when we talk about integrating most of these kids back into buildings next year. 'Cause I would guess the majority
Absolutely.
are not going to select to stay online. Some may, but I would guess the majority are going to want to go back to their buildings. And I think it's helpful for us as a district to know if the vast majority of them are going to be testing significantly lower than their in-person peers, or if they're on target with their in-person peers, because that's going to create
Yep.
as much knowledge as we can provide teachers who will have both of those kids coming together next year in their classrooms to know both groups of kids seem to be on track together, or I'm going to need to make some adjustments as I plan out my coursework for this year because I'm going to have a group that were virtual last year that are either below or, you know what I mean? I think that that's a very good point.
And not to take that data and then make judgments about the teaching and learning that has occurred this year. It's, I would expect to see differences, and I would not, I would say that that's just kind of what it is when you're, basically building the rocket ship as you know what I mean, as you go to
Sure.
space.
Oh, yeah.
It's nobody knew they were going to have to create an entire online platform for how to teach, and so I would expect there to be some discrepancies there, but I mean that's just some data that you have to look at. You absolutely have to look at. You have to know what you're dealing with. It's not about recriminations and going backwards or anything like that, but it's about you ought to know with whom you're dealing.
Sure.
I think Nathan's kind of downplaying the situational, because we made the decision this fall to not have our family choice students be in a separate school, as he mentioned, but to keep them in their home school so they kept that connectivity and information sharing and help that transition back to the school as well, which was the right decision in my mind for lots of reasons. One of the negatives of that, though, is we can't run reports to just pull the online students from each building that way. To do that, we'd have to literally go and manually pull every student, then manually calculate the work as well, which isn't something that can't be done. I'm not sure it meet the requirements validity-wise as far as compared to the official data we get back, but that's something that would take significant chunks of time to do and can be done more likely in summertime work than in right now with everything that's still going on too. So there's the pros and cons of keeping everybody together in the building. Our system does not have the capability to just disaggregate that data like we'd like it to be able to.
Well, I mean, fair enough. I understand that it's going to be probably a tedious task, and I apologize to whoever is involved in having to actually, sit and click the buttons. But again, I can't imagine that you're not gonna
No, that's
pull
that's a
that
good
data. And
point,
I
too.
understand. I'm not second guessing the decision to keep them in their schools. And I completely get it. Like, you know, it's not as simple as just clicking a button.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like, I would think, honestly, I think it's a little unfair to put the onus on teachers next year to have to go in and dig and say, were you online, were you in person, and then look at their data and see. It would be much easier for teachers to just know off the bat, if they were virtual, there's a good chance they're probably a little further behind their peers, and so if you know what I mean, if I know that kid was virtual last year, I can give them a little bit of, you know, extra attention, extra extension, you know, versus, you know, maybe I don't know, now I have to go look at your data individually. I don't know, I just feel like that's putting a lot of onus on teachers that, and they're just not gonna have the time to do that, it's not gonna happen.
I think we better be real cautious with that. Shannon, I appreciate the decision you guys made to keep them in their home school. But I think if we're not careful and we gather that information, we have to be careful what we do with that and how much that's published as well, because we don't want to separate children. We don't want to do that. From a separation standpoint and a prep standpoint, you're exactly right, as a teacher knows what they're dealing with. But I think you're saying that in here, that we've made a decision that we can't just catch everybody up right here like this. We're sprinkling and integrating into it.
Yeah, but I need to know how much I need to catch you up.
But if we get that information, we have to be careful what we do with it too, or that's my.
Well, what are we gonna do with it? I guess I'm not.
Well, I'm not
understanding
saying what
really
we
the
do with it,
implication.
what I said, what's gonna be perception out in the community is
Well, you
my
can't,
concern.
okay, but you know, the truth is the truth, the facts are the facts. You know, I think we need to just respect people enough to just give them what it is, you know, instead of, you know, constantly filtering, you know, what we think you're prepared to hear. Again,
I guess from my perspective, I was never thinking that we needed the data because the community wanted to know it. I wanted to know the data as a district planning tool of how we help these kids integrate back into the schools in the best way possible as we're sprinkling things in. And maybe we find that they're not behind. I mean, I've experienced it. Not all of them are, but some of them are. Some of them aren't. Some of them are doing great.
And we're
But that
already
would be
seeing
in
that here.
any
Yeah,
situation.
yeah.
I say that right there, I see that every day, and that is spot on. And I'd also like to point out, like, where our kids are at right now is higher than where the rest of the kids were in a normal year. So I feel like we're doing well, and it would just be helpful internally to know if certain kids in a group are going to need additional, not to pull them out, not to say it's not going to be everybody, but it would just be helpful to know that.
Yeah, and
From a planning perspective, is where my comments were coming from. I don't.
Sorry, Brett. The other thing I was going to say, going forward too, goes back to Nathan's point. This is a multiple year process. This was the start of the next school year, like any year for a teacher. They've got kids coming from different buildings, different school districts, moving in from homeschool. From this year, they'll have kids coming from online. So those fall assessments that we do will become really important then, not just from an overall numbers that we look at the district level, but for that teacher level of where are the individual kids at, and really break that data down by students and the skill level, the conversations then too. So that'll become really important for us, this fall data to begin with to kick off the year. But I'm not saying we shouldn't look at the data, because I would love to have that information. It'd be really interesting to see. Because like you said, I don't want to assume our online students are behind. They may not be. They may be right there, maybe in a
I
different
think
spot.
some of them are
as
going to
well,
surprise
too.
you,
Yep.
and some of them are going to need help. And I think that's the same with in-person. Some of them are going to surprise us, and some of them are going to need help.
I was going to say, I think that happens every single year. You are presented a group of students, and you figure out where everybody is, and then you move forward. It's no different. I mean, we can say if we know that a child was virtual, we can probably indicate on your class list, this person was virtual or not, if the teacher wants that. But I'm not
here's
sure
the
that
thing,
it
Sandra,
even is
that's-
necessary.
Right, that's a great point, because they're all in there.
Yes,
And
Yes.
whether you were virtual or not,
yeah.
you know.
but it's an
in this-
average. It's
Right,
an average,
right,
so
but-
you have no idea what the spread is. If you don't, if you're not looking at that data individually, you have no idea
Yeah,
what the
no,
spread is.
I understand, and that would be good data, but what it's not gonna change is it doesn't matter, because the teacher's gonna do whatever. Whether you
Whoever
lived
they
in
have.
Texas last year and you come to Linn-Mar, whether
Well, if
you're.
that was, I mean, fair enough, I can appreciate that, but if
Because-
that was the case, we wouldn't need data at all. Like, if it didn't really matter at all, you know, if the
Yeah,
teachers were
sure.
just gonna do what the teachers were gonna do anyway, we wouldn't even be looking at this data. The data is useful, it tells us things, that can inform our, you know, our path forward. And, you know, I just thought it was gonna be included. I was just really surprised it wasn't included.
I think it can also inform our future planning for our future online programs, is another way that we could use that data, but
Sure.
Yeah, the point's well taken. That's something we can definitely dig in to try to figure out how do we pull that data to look at and see. And it'll be,
And we should
It'll be
never
challenging to figure that part
we
out.
should never use this data, that, you know, data that we may get. We should never use this data in order to, you know, punish people or say, oh, you didn't do a good job and this proves it. We shouldn't be doing that for anything. So if we pull this data and it shows anything, I mean, to Britt's point, it may show nothing, it may show they're right on track. But if it showed anything, I hope that we would never use the data that you know, come into this boardroom with as a way to
Penalize.
accuse or,
Yeah,
you know, it should
penalize.
never be that. I just want to say that for the record.
use it to inform, not to punish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, should we move forward?
The only thing I want to add with this is there's no math, so you may have said, well, why not math? Math was a new screener in FAST that we hadn't ever used before, so we don't have comparative data, and that's really a statewide weakness. We don't have that AEA state data, so math will be something we can look at next year, and it's built into FAST this year. We're piloting some different tools, so you will see math in the future at K6, so.
Well,
Go ahead, Sandra.
I was just going to say, in the NWEA math, that test is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Because it's very specific of things that students know and don't know,
Yeah.
and it helps teachers immensely be able to figure out what they need to do to help that
Yeah.
student, so.
Yeah, so you're just in the middle of the snapshot right now to see where we're at. I wanted to just close with some of the things that will be coming back to you. So, you know, you didn't see high school. Well, we don't have a measure to really compare high school mid-year. I mean, when we were compiling this data with the later semester, they were still trying to finalize grades and everything from first semester. So, you know, we'll have full 3rd through 11th grade test scores this summer in the Iowa assessments. We will also have another FAST window for K6 and another NWEA window for 5 through 8. And so we can certainly look at that too. Just some other things there, we're utilizing intervention blocks, and so teachers and buildings and schools are looking at doing that differently. We've already started talking about a summer option. What if kids are behind? Well, what does that look like as far as either credit recovery at the high school or some really targeted interventions at the K-8 level? So we'll be looking at that as well and using our data to determine some of those things. And then, you know, we'll give you a full snapshot of where we ended the year. The Iowa assessment data will be really good. They've got some new, better reports for us that are really specific and targeted along to the standards, which you would think we have something like that, but for years we've never had a test that'll do that. So we're excited about the Iowa assessments. So that's a look at the winter snapshot. I do appreciate the feedback and questions on it. What other questions?
Do you have,
Thank you.
I was just wondering, I know we switched over to that FAST math, but don't we do math testing with NWEA at the, you know, I don't know when the NWEA starts.
We do in 5th and 6th grade, although we didn't with 5th graders last year, so, and the 6th graders this year we haven't done with 5th grade in the past, and this year 6th graders didn't test last spring, so that's why we didn't include that 5, 6. But yes, NWA has math, and so we can have that measure moving forward.
Sounds good.
But we didn't have a K4 measure for math, and that's where FAST has come up with a screener for us.
Okay, let's move forward. Thank you, Nathan.
Okay, thanks, appreciate
We
it.
had a board visit to the Compass program, and most of us were able to be there. I'm just going to go around. If there's something you'd like to say, we'll just each do that and move on from there. Barry, is there something you'd
It
like
was a
to?
good session. We were just there this last year, so it really wasn't anything new, but it was very good. So
Okay.
appreciate it.
Clark, is there anything you'd like to add?
What I was impressed with is that how everything is broken down. Everybody was engaged, but for the Atlas students to be able to just to walk down the hallway, get into the Compass program and enhance their education. And then one of the things that was nice is that I asked Steve if anybody came back, you know, because once they move on, hey, are we having some success? And he gave examples of people coming back and then being able to hook up with, the one example he gave was a construction situation for him. So you know, you can see that the kids are getting the connection, you know? And instead of a mass exodus, they're staying and they're coming back. And I think the Atlas program, it just reinforces how important that is from where they were before and what they are doing now, and how those students are staying there and moving on. And that, to me, that was what was impressive. And those teachers are doing just an absolutely fantastic job for teaching multi-areas, but, you know, things from cubicles that they can be in where they can concentrate better. I think it was really nice. And to know that our numbers are still there from what they were 5 years ago, you know, and they're good and solid, and it's keep growing. They did a great job. I was impressed.
Thank you. Here, is there anything?
I don't have anything additional.
No, I don't either, other than it was a great visit. Britt, did you have something you'd
I
like
just
to say?
commend the versatility that they've discovered that works really well for their program with the hybrid situation and how
Yeah.
that is going to improve their program going forward. I think that any flexibility that makes those kids stronger, I think is great. And I'll just say a thank you again for the cookies, because my boys really enjoyed them.
That was awesome. Tim, would you like to add
I'll just
something?
say that I agree with what everyone said, but it's also one of those hidden gems that a lot of people
Yes.
don't even know we have in
That's true.
in the district, so.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on to Finance Audit Committee. We've got members here that are a part of that, and then JT is here to help us too. Someone like to jump in?
Yeah, I
Go
can
for it, Tim.
start, I guess, and then, so we're gonna we're gonna vote on a Indian Creek project tonight. We talked a little bit about that, talked about the certified and amended budget, and JT will kind of chime in on that as when the time's right as well. So I thought it was a pretty good meeting. Those are the kind of highlights I had on there.
Yeah, he gave us some good projections now that we know what SSA is, and, you know, it's always tough when SSA isn't what you want it to be, but we look like we're in a good position, and that's always good to see. And again, we always appreciate JT's expertise and foresight in putting all that together for us, so it looks good.
Thank you. Barry, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just, we're waiting on one item. I don't know if they had the hearing on that yet, or when is that going to be
The
on?
hearing is a week from tomorrow, so the 16th.
Okay.
Yep. That's the SBRC hearing where we go and ask for the initial staffing costs for Boulder Peak and Hazel Point.
Okay.
Yep, so that'll be next week.
All right, we can move on from there. Let's see what's next here. Okay, Barry, you're on for a couple of these here.
That conference
The
board
Linn-
was,
yeah, Linn
was
County
very
Conference
enlightening.
Board.
I think it was 3.5 minutes this time.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
Didn't you have a full
longer to
meeting
get
last
there.
time?
what's that?
Didn't you actually have a full meeting last time?
Yeah, we had a very
So they
good
had to
meeting.
make up for that.
This one, what this actually was it was the you know, they posted the budget, and they had to open the public hearing and close the public hearing, and that was basically it, both on the conference, the district, and on the city. So, nope, it's all good.
Okay.
Even that meeting to Zoom has to have been like the best thing.
Oh, my gosh. I sat in my car on my cell phone.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, because
Because
You just
otherwise
have
it
to
took
drive
you.
all the way
Yes.
downtown
Yeah.
for
Oh,
that
gee.
3-minute meeting.
Yeah.
Took you
So-
longer to get there than it
Yeah.
was to even find it in there and have the meeting, as I recall. And also, I believe you did the Marion City.
The city council was pretty uneventful. They're spending so much time on streetscape,
Yeah.
and there's some buildings that are being tore down, there was nothing on there having to do with neighborhoods or anything like that
Okay.
at this time, so.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we have a legislative update. Shannon, you can decide how you want us to proceed on that one.
Yeah, I kick off a couple little things, and I'll let Britt and Tim chime in, as well as the legislative liaisons. Couple things, was the funnel deadline, our funnel date was Friday, which is always a good point to get to, because this year there was so many bills that were being proposed constantly, and the bills had to get through committee to get to survive funnel week, so now it's down to 230 or something like that, number of bills to work with. So that is a nice piece to get to help focus on a few other things instead of playing this constant popcorn game of here comes another bill and another one, and so that was helpful. We did have a good conversation, a short conversation, but a good one with our legislators Friday afternoon. Again, our legislators are typically very supportive of public education, so they gave us an update kind of on where they saw things after the funnel, and a couple of bills that we really hadn't talked a whole lot about lately that they focused on to make sure we've paid attention to still. Pre-K funding is one that still may get reconsidered. That was kind of an unintended consequence, I think, with all of the decline in enrollment. That also impacts preschool, and there's a larger impact at preschool because there's no budget guarantee like there is for K-12. That doesn't impact us as much as some other schools in Iowa, but still a good thing for us to advocate for, to make sure preschools get funded appropriately. And the other one is ELL funding. Thought the legislators did a nice job of helping us understand. There's a bill out there that looks like it's actually funding ELL in a more supportive way, but in reality, it's just a shell game where some higher needs ELL students, we get more funding for a little bit, but then for students that are less need ELL, we'd actually get less funding, so it was essentially a wash. That's kind of how they broke it down, so they were disappointed that was the case too. But those are kind of the two main highlights I thought from that topic. And then just the two bills of interest I mentioned to you on Friday, I think we need to really keep close eyes on this week and going forward. Charter schools, that did survive the House and potentially be able to be debated on the floor this week as well. And then supplemental funding, we'll have to see where that ends up because the House and Senate bills are very, very different. So we'll see what that looks like. Obviously, we would support increased one-time funding for schools with all the unique challenges this year. We also make sure it's equitable for all schools in Iowa. And as of now, neither bill really has that in its current format. So, Tim, Britt, anything else you want to add? I know Britt has a couple of documents to share, summarize things as well.
So it's just hard to keep track. So I follow an education forum, and they do a really nice job. So that's where the live and dead list came from. So you can just kind of glance down, and if there was a specific bill you were curious about, it's hopefully on the list. It'll tell you dead or alive, and dead meaning it didn't make the final deadline. And I can say I've never looked forward to a final deadline more than I have this year. Like Friday night was good. I went to the town hall meeting on Saturday, in addition to the Grantwood meeting on Friday. Town hall is just community-wide, and Senator Mathis and Representative Donahue weren't available on Friday for Grantwood, but they did come to the town hall. So I did get to hear some of their perspectives. And I think one thing that's important to remember is there's always, they call it the Christmas tree bill at the end of the session, where any bill that may be dead gets tacked on as an amendment. So vouchers are like 95% dead, but they could come back as a Christmas tree bill, or if the Senate version, which is the full bill, is still technically alive. It's just the House isn't picking up pieces. So we'll keep our eye on that. The second page it's a revision of the letter we sent to the Education Committee last week. We just took out the voucher section because that bill is no longer alive in the House. And we've just focused it more heavily on the charter aspect to send to the full House members this week before their floor debate. So hopefully, even though it came out of the Education Committee last week, which was a contentious 4-hour debate into Wednesday night, I mean, they fought hard against the charter bill. So hopefully, it'll still have some fight on the House floor. So this is the letter that we propose to send to House members. It's very similar to the other one from last week. It just takes out the other two bills, basically. So we'll want to send that out soon if there's approval on that.
Can you email it to us again? Or Shannon or somebody send it to us electronically
Yep.
again? Yeah, that was super
I want to give you a paper
helpful.
copy tonight, and we can certainly send an electronic
I
copy.
could like just redline this for you right now.
No, that's fine too. I mean, I'm good with red lines. The only other thing I wanted to mention is if you remember a few weeks ago, we did get a communication from a community member after we put out a proclamation on school funding, and they asked us to do a proclamation on some of the anti-LGBTQ legislation. All of those bills are dead. So we don't have to send anything. We were gonna, Shannon replied very well to that community member, I think, saying we were gonna watch the bills, and if they came up and looked like they were gonna move, we would act on them. I just wanted to share that they didn't go anywhere, so we don't need to do anything on those.
Thank you so
Did
much.
I miss anything?
No,
Anything else,
I
Tim?
don't think so. I had never seen this before, SF 289, when, about the 6 or 7 one now, changes when school board president is elected, how school boards report money, how they pay membership in IASB. I needed to go read that one. I wonder why.
Say that one's alive. The one requiring school board candidates to declare a party affiliation did not make it through the funnel, so that's, yeah, they wanted to make
That's good.
school boards political.
Which was
And
similar
with
to-
that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, just real quick, was there any discussion about changing the school election to a different time? Okay.
No, I
That
think
was-
they're gonna stick with the change they made
Okay.
2 years ago for
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I don't know if enough districts made enough noise saying it actually costs us more. Or I know it cost us more that election year.
I think we made noise, I'm not sure anybody listened, to be honest.
We tried,
And then
Like I
moved on
said,
to all
enough
these other
noise.
bills.
I don't know.
we tried.
But I was going to basically say the same thing, that, the concern about school board elections becoming more political, the concern, besides the November elections becoming more expensive for us, it also is a concern become more aligned to all the other political elections, and want to make sure that doesn't become the case, because
Yeah.
school boards are here for students, not for politics, and that's potentially a dangerous slope to slide down, so.
I was looking at this SF 478, which is a little concerning to me, restricts what topics school districts can address with staff and students, and it calls it a First Amendment bill. That'd be really interesting to know what that actually means.
It's, I want to say that one is primarily focused on higher education,
Yeah.
but lumps us in. It's-
More university level.
Yeah, that's their target, but I think they're lumping in all of us
Right.
together. But they're going after the universities on that one.
Well, that's even more concerning,
It is
because
more
then
concerning.
then it has more likelihood of passing, do you know what I mean?
Well, because it's followed up right after that, you see that they want to prohibit tenure again. And that's actually moving this year, and before it's never moved. So there's still a lot to be
Keep an
aware
eye.
of.
Yeah, it's a lot. This is
Yeah.
good. This is a good list.
Thank you
Thank you
for that.
it.
That's helpful. Okay, let's move on to our cabinet update. Shannon?
Yeah, just to wrap up the legislative piece of it,
Oh,
really, no, just wanted to commend Tim and Britt for their work to help on the liaison roles, because it is a lot of action in the State House this year especially, so it's always good to have those connections and communications, but it's easy between the 8 of us to assume somebody else is going to see that or do that, so it's nice to have others to connect with and really monitor it closely, because it's a fast-moving target this year, so appreciate the team approach this year. It's been helpful. For my update, just real briefly for you, Facility Advisory Committee, in the process of still gathering some names, got quite a few already, and we'll continue to work that through. Let that committee take shape. I want to have it be a pretty broad-based group across our district. Anticipate having that committee membership in place sometime in April, so we can get ready to roll this spring yet with some first organizational meetings. I meet with OPN on Wednesday to kind of walk through those first agendas, revisit our timeline we established about a year ago and had to revise and revamp thanks to COVID, so we'll be updating that, and I will bring you a new version of that, hopefully at our April 12th board meeting for a new timeline for that as well. So I'm really excited to get going to that work. I'm anxious to see where we can to get to. It's kind of like the assessment data Nathan shared. It's fun to get back to that work again. The academic focus, our facility planning focus. So it's exciting to get into that important work that we really need to do long term too. So hang in there, more information to come relatively soon on that front. But I couldn't just skip COVID altogether. 2 quick updates for you on the COVID front. As I mentioned in Friday's communication, our staffing numbers right now are really, really good. So really proud of our staff. They're being as careful as they can and doing what they can. We have 0 staff right now with testing positive and very, very few in quarantine. Our student numbers are much, much better than they have been as well. So I'll knock on whatever this wood here is to hopefully continue that piece, because that's been a game changer for us to have some consistency in our education. So that's been fantastic.
I have a COVID-related question.
Yep.
So in the memo, you said we're going to head into the second round of vaccinations.
That was my next thing to talk about.
Do we have everyone on the same day?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. We do not have everybody on the same day. We have everybody at certain levels on the same day.
Because West Liberty canceled school today because so
Yep.
many of their staff had
Couple of
reactions
schools
to
have
their
done that.
second dose that they don't have staff.
So the
I
good
just
news,
wanted to ask the question.
I didn't feel
Yep.
very good after my second dose.
yeah, the good news is we are beginning the second round of vaccinations this week. We've finished
you got
everybody
to
that
find
wanted
out.
the vaccine, and Linn-Mar employees have had a chance to do that, so that's been fantastic. Now we're excited because this week we start the second round, so that's a good thing, but like even this year, anything that's good still comes with a challenge. It seems like across all fronts. So this week is we're back to the first round that we had to begin with 4 weeks ago, which was our elementary staff. Not all of them, but really close to all of them. So that is all scheduled for this Thursday. So those that have had the second round, we've heard other people That day after it can be challenging for some individuals, there's no doubt about that. So we are concerned what this Friday will look like. We've had a lot of conversations going back and forth about how to make this work, what's the worst case scenario, how do we plan for that. So we're still in the process of working through some of those kinks, and we'll have plans ready to go that we're sure this many staff here, so we'll cover it. It is a possibility, worst case scenario, that we are not able to have school for elementary on Friday. That is a possibility. I don't think that's where we'll end up. I feel good that we have some initial plans and things we'll get in place to help cover everything and supervise, but it's one of those things, we've never done this before, so we won't really know until we experience it. So we'll see. We meet as a cabinet tomorrow on this topic, and then we meet with principals on Wednesday to talk through some things on this front as well. Buildings are already putting together contingency plans of how they can cover for each other, which is great, but the reality is they don't know who they're covering for even necessarily. So it's a whole bunch of unique planning to go for everything too. So yeah, West Liberty did cancel school today. I think another school in Southeast Iowa had canceled last week with it too. So we're kind of learning from those schools that had shots before us as far as what's working, what's becoming challenging. So it'll be interesting this week at the very least to see. So we're hoping we have very few side effects.
We're playing a game of how many different reasons we can cancel school this year. COVID, derecho, weather, vaccine.
Oh, yeah. Not a fun game to play. So.
Are you gonna, just as tangential to that, I know that we were gonna make a change to the calendar. If that would happen where we would have to cancel school, what would that look like? You know, do we have a day built in, or?
If it's only
We would
one
have
hour.
hours built in, so we
Yeah,
wouldn't need
won't do
to.
anything.
Something we could discuss later on down the road if we wanted to or not to do that. Here's the domino
level,
effect
but
of
then
this
the next level
decision.
will have
I know,
the same
but it
thing.
would be-
Exactly, I was gonna say, the
Yeah.
domino, this becomes, this is only the first round of our vaccine distribution for the second dose. Then we have the same things for our intermediate schools and middle schools and the high schools following that as well. And those are a little bit different situation because every time we do this, as I've told you before, it's the provider pretty much dictates to us the when, the where, the how, and which vaccine. So they all look a little bit different as far as how that will play out. For example, on our intermediate schools and middle school, when it's their turn for second round, they are not all on the same day. They are essentially one building per day. So that'll have some pros and some cons to that as well.
So you could potentially have just as a potential, Westfield might have to be closed one day, and then Bowman, and then Indian Creek. Are they stacked?
There'll be more Boulder Peak, Hazel Point, Excelsior.
Okay, so the
Yep.
elementaries are all going on the same
this
day.
Thursday.
But this, you
Oh,
could
yeah.
And Friday,
potentially,
a little bit,
oh, that's
so.
crazy.
Yep, so each round has its own set of fun and challenges
Yes,
to work
good
through.
fun.
The universe is just really like, it's playing a game with you this year, Shannon. It's like, keep you on your toes,
I don't know if
Yeah,
it's good or
when
bad,
when I
but
saw the story about West Liberty this morning, I just went, we're getting our second round this week. I wonder,
Yep.
it'd be nice if it was on Friday, but that would be too convenient.
Well,
Jan-
So-
yeah.
No,
yeah.
no, don't be silly.
Shannon tried very hard.
we
Oh,
requested, Lisa tried very hard on
Yeah,
that one. We
yeah.
requested it the first time.
Yeah.
And after we heard about West Liberty, Lisa called them again today, and just, now that we're seeing other schools have troubles, is there any chance we can make that adjustment? She got the same answer as last time. Wasn't even a maybe, or we'll see what we can do. It was a flat out no. Is that
Beggars
safe to
can't be
say?
choosers.
Thank you.
You take
Thank
it when
you
you
for
can.
trying, Lisa.
You take it when you can get it, essentially, and, I mean, it was a very short conversation both
We'll
times.
just keep our
so.
fingers crossed that we have the superhumans we know we have as teachers that just all get through it.
That they don't interact.
Yeah,
All right.
that's, and then the last thing I'll just mention too, with the commencement approaching, like I mentioned to you on Friday, we are planning to have in-person commencement. It'll look different than normally, just from some guidance we'll have to follow, but excited to be able to go back to more of a traditional celebration for our seniors this year. They have had quite the journey the last year, almost to the day as well. So excited to have that opportunity, and many more details to come out on that, but that will be hopefully a positive step in the right direction. So,
That's May 30th.
yes, May 30th.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Is that it then?
That is it for me. Thank you.
Okay, so we go into unfinished business. I need a motion for 501.1.
Make a motion to award the bid for the Indian Creek Elementary HVAC project to Universal Climate Control at the lowest responsive bidder for a base bid of $123,800.
Okay.
Just
Any,
real quick,
any
JT commented, maybe you said that earlier, this came in under budget.
Yeah, the initial project bid was, or estimate was $150,000, so we were
Wow.
significantly under what the engineer
Good.
estimate was. Yep.
Like those.
fantastic. And you felt like we were getting everything we needed for that lower bid.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
I make a motion to approve setting a public hearing for 5 PM on Monday, April 12th for approval of the certified budget for fiscal year 2022.
Okay, Marion. Any questions, discussion?
Just to point out, so this is the approval to have the public hearing in April. So what will happen after this meeting, in 2 weeks, we'll publish the budget in the newspaper, and then we'll have the hearing at our meeting April 12th. So in that publication, it's going to have our proposed tax rate, which, if you remember 2 years ago when we went through the bond issues, we kind of projected out what our tax rates were going to be for the next 5 years. And so we're kind of in the second or third year of that, and we projected $17.87, which is a decrease from last year of about 14 cents.
Is it an increase or
Decrease.
a decrease? Okay.
But what we need to, and we talked about this in finance audit, even though our portion of the levy is decreasing, the actual property taxes paid, there will be a slight increase because of the rollback. The rollback percentage for residential homeowners did increase by about 2.4%. So, for example, and it's in that exhibit, if you have a home assessed at $200,000, your annual taxes are going to go up about $33, which is less than $3 a month. But again, it's because of that rollback percentage that is more.
What is the rollback percentage?
It's basically the amount of value that's actually taxable for your house. And the
Right.
state dictates that.
But that's a state thing, so it's
It's a
not,
state thing.
it's not increasing because of us, it's
Not us,
increasing
it's a
because of the
state thing.
state.
It's an
Yeah, okay.
equalization.
We've kept our promise.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's,
Let's keep saying that.
I think that's really an important point to make,
Yep.
because we really have tried to do that.
Yep.
You projected it, we're going
Yep.
for it, so thank
Yep.
you.
And we'll
Working
continue, if you
hard.
look at that 5-year projection, we're projecting it to decrease it even further next year. So we'll try to hit those marks. But anyway, just wanted to say that before you voted.
No?
Well, it's important, I think, like Sandra and Britt were saying, that when it's in the paper, that we make it perfectly clear, so there's no confusion that we are holding the way we had planned and, what the state can do and what we have no control over. I think that would save some angst to some of the
you.
taxpayers.
Okay,
in our
so,
district.
I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Make a motion to approve a revision to the 2020,
Wait, I have a question before we approve what's presented, and I talked to Shannon about it a little bit, and he said we could talk about it first.
Yeah, we make a motion, then we second it, then we have discussion, and then we pass it.
Okay, so,
so make a, okay.
yeah, Rachel made the motion.
Make,
Kara's second, okay.
I don't think I even finished the motion.
Oh, okay, do you want to?
I
I mean,
apologize.
I make a motion to approve a revision to the 2020-2021 school calendar as presented.
Okay, second by Kara. Now we can discuss. What was your question?
I think, and I've heard from many, many people, parents and teachers, that it's too long into June, even with the loss of learning that we're concerned about. Going to June 9th and keeping the staff for the rest of that week. I think we have to find a balance between how many days into June we go and the mental health. We've talked all year about the strain this year has put on our staff, and we know that if we go halfway or almost halfway into June, they're going to be coming right back at the beginning of August. I think they need the break. My personal opinion is that we shouldn't go past June 4th. And so that's what I would like to discuss. Is it necessary to go into the second week of June, especially after we heard tonight from Nathan that where the data is and that it's a 2-year recovery process. We don't expect it to all be complete this year. We're going to continue meeting those needs next year. So that is my request, is that we don't go to June 9th. We end it somewhere the first week of June. And that's consistent with the other schools that were hit with the derecho in our community. They're actually ending by June 1st. So that's what I wanted to discuss.
I'll give a little clarification with that, because I did some follow-up right after we chatted about other schools' end dates, because I couldn't remember when they were. I think Marion is scheduled for June 11th for kids. I'm not sure when they are for staff. College Community is June 4th for kids, June 8th for staff. And then Cedar Rapids is looking, they have some time to make up, because the snow days they did not have accounted for, so they're looking at that June 3rd or 4th, it looks like, as well, but I'm not sure that's been officially finalized either.
I ran down their website still says June 1st.
Correct.
But maybe they haven't updated
I think
it.
they're waiting to see if they have any more snow days or
Right. So-
COVID vaccine recovery days or things that happen.
I'm
that
just
week,
asking
too.
for the first
Yep.
week of June, somewhere in there, if it's June 4th. I just think that June 9th, even June 9th is I just think it's too late into the summer. My personal feeling, and like I said, I've heard from lots of concerned parents and staff members as well.
In the context of my recommendation, is to move the calendar back from June 10th as the student last day to June 9th. And two reasons for that. One, a little bit quicker wrap up for students as we get into that middle of June time period. But also, we do have days built in from the derecho waiver that we received from the state. That does give us some flexibility. But as we've started to look at time to gather devices, seems like a simple thing to do, but when we have over 1,500 devices out with families that are in the virtual learning model, that is their avenue to learning, so we can't ask for those devices to come back before school's out. So the thinking was that would give us the afternoon of the 9th and then the 10th and the 11th to gather devices. Teachers would have work days, and then they would be done on the 11th. So 3 days sooner for staff, 1 day sooner for students. So that balance conversation, there's certainly argument on both sides as far as when is the right time to end, when is how late do you want to go versus the value of a day of learning too. So I can certainly see that angle of it. In my mind, this is the balance that I'm comfortable with, but I know there's others out there that'd like to be done sooner.
Any comments from anybody?
I don't know that I would want to make that big of a change to the calendar at this point in the year. Like, we had committed to giving our parents multi-year calendars at a time intentionally to allow for more planning. I think there are other pieces outside of just the school year that hinge on that last day, like daycare in the buildings, for example, or I'm not comfortable making that big of a change at this stage in the game for our parents.
Is there anybody else having a comment? Tim? I'm just looking at you, I can tell you're
No, I think
contemplating, so I'm just asking.
No, I was thinking about what
Both-
people
both
said. I
sides.
guess I lean toward what Kara had said too.
Yeah.
And
I got you. Okay. Anyone else?
Can you speak to isn't there also a change for the teachers reporting in this calendar? Like, there were 2 days, like the 14th and the 15th, I thought?
Correct. So we'd be looking at would be the date earlier was June, I believe it was June 16th, 14th, 15th,
Yeah,
16th.
something
Teachers
like
were
that.
scheduled to come back. And we'd have them finish up on June 11th. So they'd be done that second Friday in June instead of going into that third week as well. Partially because of obviously the unique school year teachers have had to encounter and to work through, and also, to be honest, we need time in our buildings for construction as we have derecho damage repair work to get done, and we don't want to put teachers at risk of being hit by falling debris or roof challenges and everything else as well.
So by making this change, we're having 2 days for picking up all of our devices, basically.
Correct.
And the last day will be the 9th, and then the teachers will not be back for the 3 days of the next week.
Correct.
That's our changes that we're making.
That's my recommendation.
Okay, okay. Any more discussion?
so last day would be a Tuesday, is that what we're saying?
Be a Wednesday.
Wednesday, the
Wednesday,
9th,
okay.
and then 10th and 11th, teachers would still be there, but they'll be bringing back devices and getting everything. So by the end of Friday, basically,
Okay.
everyone's done.
And then how long is that?
Correct.
When does back to school for teachers?
So it's going to be like 2 months.
Oh, August 11th or 12th, I believe.
So they get-
I don't
It's
remember
about,
exactly
it's
that
about
date,
2 months,
but-
yeah,
Okay.
somewhere right in there, I think
That seems
that's right.
reasonable. I mean,
Okay,
Yeah, I don't remember the exact date, but it's right around that 11th or 12th time, I think.
okay, so are we ready to vote? We're good, okay. So, all those in favor of the way it was presented by Shannon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it carries. Open enrollment request, please.
Make a motion to approve the open enrollment requests as presented, or is there
Second.
anything here?
All right.
There aren't any.
Okay.
You should have an attachment in your, since it's looking ahead to next year, the first time after the March 1st deadline,
Oh, I
there's quite a
see.
list, so you should have an
It's huge.
attachment,
Yeah.
separate sheet instead of taking full pages in your
Yeah.
agenda.
I went and looked online.
It was in the,
Is it just online?
Yeah, I just
Is
went
that
on.
what-
Okay.
okay, I was gonna say, I don't think
There's a list in here.
Oh,
Yeah, because it's quite a list.
Attached to this.
Okay.
Pretty long list, he said.
All right, so I think we're good. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Move to
Consent
approve the
agenda.
consent agenda as presented.
Very Kara. Okay, any comments on what is to follow? I see that Lori Brown, third
Yes.
grade teacher at Indian Creek, was at Bowman for a short time, spent at Indian Creek a long time, decided to retire, so I wish her well.
Well, yeah, I'd like to comment, not only has Lori been here, but she's a Linn-Mar grad. Her sister and brother are all Linn-Mar grads and spread throughout the country, but Lori has, done a fantastic job for us, and she'll be greatly missed. I know that not only at Indian Creek, but just in the populace of our fantastic teachers, so.
Was she your student?
Yes, she was.
We kind of figured that, Barry, right?
Yeah, so were her brother and her sisters, yes.
Oh, my God. So anyway,
However, we're not.
That's a compliment.
Oh, okay.
okay.
Oh, okay.
Anything else? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we're to, if I can get there, excuse me.
Quick communications
Yeah.
question. I had a request. Are we allowing attendees to come to the board meetings now, or would we rather they do it virtual?
We'd rather do it virtually. It's something we might want to revisit. It's interesting you bring that up now too, because on a bigger scale of communications, we've had some questions about everything from, do we still have to wear masks, to can we start to have volunteers back in buildings, can we, different events. So that's a cabinet topic we're going to be discussing too, as far as recommendations, kind of in multiple tiers of what things do we want to look at potentially changing for the fourth quarter, what things we want to look at potentially changing this summer, in the next school year too. But yes, as of now, that's still
doesn't
our
the
same guidance.
website says you can come, but you have to wear a mask, and we ask for social distancing, but you can't talk.
Correct.
Like, all communications have to be electronic, but people could still come if they wanted to.
Yep. We've
Is what
been
it says on the website.
encouraging
Yeah.
social distance and watch virtual.
But
Yep.
but we still have to be cautious how many might attend, correct? For numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, any other communications? Okay,
Oh, I was going to say, Doug,
Doug
wrestling-
Stryker, congratulations.
Yeah.
Coach of the year
Coach
for
of
the
year.
Mississippi Valley Wrestling.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
fantastic,
And Tate Knocknaborn is a wrestler of the year.
Yeah, was a state champion.
very cool.
Linn-Mar finished 7th overall.
All right, any other comments for board calendar, any comments there? Be thinking ahead for Lion Learning, it looks like it's April 20th, we can be thinking
What's the
ahead.
topic?
That's the topic I'm looking at right now. I'd like to look at some of the facility advisory conversations. The timing of that may be a little iffy, so that date may not be 100% set in stone yet either, so.
If we're just going to start that in April, we might need to move that
That's
back
what I'm
a
thinking.
bit, maybe, I
Yep.
don't know, it's just,
It depends how
I'm
fast we
just
can pull
thinking.
together the committee and
yeah.
initial work.
Otherwise, the community's gonna ask a lot of questions we don't have answers to.
I know, we'll be
Yeah.
going, good question.
We don't know, we'll let you
When I
know.
set that
We'll
date
get back
originally, I
with you.
thought we'd be a little farther along, and,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah.
so that maybe need to be adjusted, either the topic or the date as we get this next month.
Okay,
If we don't know about facilities, but we do know more about next year's online program, that might be a topic to consider.
Yeah, there could be
If we know.
plenty of topics to choose from, that's for sure. So
There's
yeah,
always
facility may
something.
not be the right timing for it.
okay. Right, anything else?
The Compass Pancake Breakfast, is that here? I mean, I guess I
It
haven't.
says
heard that before.
LRC, so what does that mean?
Just come down, come and eat breakfast then?
basically, Mr. Goodall has his little pancake set up and serves for his staff and his students, and we're inviting board members to come to that
Okay.
too. So,
All right.
All right,
On the calendar.
he might put you to work, so beware.
that's fine. Anything else? All right, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second. You pick who does what.
Good luck with that.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.